So welcome to Coffee Connect. This is Rodney Chronister's amazing group that's been going on for how many years now, Rodney?
We're going on 6.
6 years. Wow. If you're not on the email list, can everybody see the screen? The Coffee Connect. Thank you.
I can, yes.
Thank you. If you're not on his email list, send an email to ccinfo@addictedtoconnecting. That's the number 2.com. And the website is addictedtoconnecting.com, which always has the same link for the Zoom link for the meetings and the password for the meetings. Do we have any celebrations or announcements besides welcome home, Rodney, and your family from your European trip? Any celebrations and announcements that anybody would like to mention? Don't all speak at once. All right, then I'm going to jump on to reminders. If you meet somebody on Coffee Connect, please send them a private message or at least call them out to schedule a one-to-one with them. It's through these one-to-ones that we get to know, like, and trust each other. And that's how networking works. Also, Rodney's got a goal of getting out. Is it 100 new people this year?
Yep, 100 new people.
We are, as of now, up to 26 new visitors to Coffee Connect. Please continue to invite people to join us. Once they come, they tend to come back because this is a fun event. And we're counting the numbers. So I did not increase the thermometer, but I did increase the number on the slide so we can fix the thermometer later, Rodney.
Perfect.
Now, today we have a treat. This is Samantha Kelly. She's a neurodiversity advocate and public speaker and the founder of Beyond Neurodiversity. Samantha, you told me that you were introduced to this group by Jessica?
Yeah, Jessica Morris.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you, Jessica, for that. I did ask her how she wanted to be introduced, and she said any name is fine. So I guess her friends call her Sam, and we can call her Samantha, or the other way around. I'm going to hand this off to you, Samantha, and I'm going to stop sharing so you can take over.
Awesome.
Stop sharing button. All right.
All righty then. Let me get my slides all pulled up here. Can I get some thumbs up if we can see the slides? Okay, rock and roll.
Yes.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am really excited to be here today. As Jeff shared, I was connected with this group via Jessica Morris. I've had great conversations with Rodney, and I'm really excited to talk a little bit about embracing neurodiversity in the workplace. For some, neurodiversity is a new term. Can you send I think I'm sharing, there we go. Can you send a reaction in the group if you know what neurodiversity is? Send a thumbs up or send a heart or raise your hands. Yes, I can see everybody now. There we go. Okay. So some folks, we've got some hearts, we got some thumbs up. Awesome. Okay. Sometimes when I say, hey, I'm really excited, I want to talk to you about neurodiversity, people kind of go, what? Are you talking about like brain surgery? No, I'm not that intelligent. I do not have my PhD. Neurosurgery, very, very different. Neurodiversity is the way that we think, process, perceive the world. We're all encompassed in the term neurodiversity, and I will get more into that in a little bit. But first, I'd love to kind of just introduce who I am a little bit. As Jeff mentioned, I'm a neurodivergent advocate. I am incredibly passionate about creating inclusive workplaces for all neurotypes. So not just individuals with ADHD and autism and dyslexia, but also people who are considered neurotypical. I will define those terms in a hot second, I promise. I am a professional with ADHD. So through therapies, treatments, medications, support, you name it, through a variety of different support systems, I have found ways to live and thrive with ADHD in both my personal and my professional lives. It's taken a lot of work, but those lessons have taught me some really phenomenal strategies and tools that I now share with other individuals and companies in the area who are looking for support. I'm an IAP certified coach, which means I'm trained to support individuals on their own journeys. And I am a Cincinnati native. I'm a fan of the trifecta, Skyline, La Roses, and Graders. I do not believe you can go wrong, but you can only go wrong if you have all three of them in one day. Your stomach may not appreciate you. I've not tried it. I'd be very scared if I did. But just a little fun fact about me.
Oh,
Um,
come on in, Sammy. The water's fine. I've tried all three.
I appreciate that, Joe. I appreciate it. Maybe this weekend we'll see if I can convince my husband to hit all three in a day. That would be a journey. Anyway, so a little bit about my journey. How did I end up here? Why am I talking to you? What's the point of today's presentation? Well, I found out at age 27 that I was diagnosed with ADHD. And it was these answers to lifelong questions. Imagine with me, right? Imagine spending your life fighting yourself to send emails, to tackle unmotivating tasks, to navigate work with little to no focus. Those were the challenges that I was facing. And I found through this diagnosis, I found answers to why can't I seem to send emails? Why can't I remember to follow up on basic tasks? Why am I always procrastinating on projects? So that was a phenomenal answer to really, really challenging questions, and questions that carried a lot of shame and a lot of stigma with them. Through this diagnosis and through the support of my team, I began to find ways and strategies to thrive in environments that weren't built for me. I finally had the insight and the access that I needed to figure out what was going on, how I could work around my brain and with my brain rather than working against it. And in some cases, that was time blocking. It was pairing myself with people who had complementary strengths. You name it, like there's a long, long list of strategies. But in that process, as I began to share my story and talk more and more about it, I began to find more individuals who were experiencing very, very similar challenges and moments of reconciliation and really aha moments as they went through their own diagnosis journeys. Or maybe they had been diagnosed at a young age, but finally somebody was talking about the challenges that they faced on a daily basis in the professional world. So I felt very touched by this community, and I felt called to turn my experience, this whirlwind of, oh my gosh, I'm neurotypical one moment and neurodivergent the next. I felt like this was the opportunity to turn that into a professional mission. So today, I have created Beyond Neurodiversity. We work with organizations to help them create the spaces that support neurodivergent individuals. And ultimately, we're creating systemic change in organizations one step at a time. So it's something that I'm very proud of. It's something that I have a lot of passion for, but that just gives you a little insight as to why the heck is this lady talking to us today? Okay. A little bit about our agenda. So first, we're going to define neurodiversity. We're going to use some level setting terms, and we're going to make sure that we all are operating with the same language. We're going to talk about the benefits of embracing neurodiversity, both in the workplace, but outside of the workplace as well. And then we'll touch on some inclusion strategies and tactics. Throughout this, I'm going to try to follow the Coffee Connect structure, where I'm going to ask you some questions and we'll either break out into break rooms. Maybe we'll do like a reaction kind of poll, or I'll just ask for you to chip in and to share your experiences. As I was told by Jeff, he was very, very kind, that this is a safe space. I would love to hear your thoughts, your experiences. I am eager to hear from you in this experience as well. So please don't hesitate to raise your hand, ask a question, and then Jeff or Rodney, if I'm missing anything, please don't hesitate to stop me, because I'll just talk all day about this, and I'll just keep on going. But first, so what is neurodiversity? Can I get a volunteer to kind of share their own definition of what they understand neurodiversity to be?
I can try.
Bring it on.
All right. In layman's terms, the wires, they're crossed, they're jumbled. They don't flow. They're not smooth. They're just kind of like Christmas tree lights that are just in a big ball. Yeah, good luck undoing that. And that is your brain on neurodivergence.
Okay. I've never heard the Christmas tree. or the Christmas lights analogy, but that clicks with me very, very well. So I like that. Anybody else?
Just how different people perceive different stimulus and different information.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Joe and Jeff have defined two very different but very similar terms. So neurodiversity, like Joe said, is the way that we all perceive the world around us. It is a natural variation. It describes the way that people think, learn, perceive the world, interact, and process information differently. But it also includes elements of cognitive diversity. So that means neurotypes like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and a whole slew of others. But each of these bring unique perspectives. This is what it means to be neurodivergent. And I think, Jeff, this is kind of what you were referring to, the Christmas lights, right? Where things are all kind of, they're jumbled, or maybe they're wired differently, or they're enmeshed in different ways. So that might be what it feels like to be neurodivergent. In fact, speaking from experience, yes, there are definitely times where it feels like the Christmas lights are jumbled. But overall, neurodiversity really is a growing social movement. It pushes for acceptance of our differences, of our challenges, of our cognitive diversity, rather than necessarily curing something. You've probably seen that in the news a lot recently. You've seen a lot of headlines about curing this or that. Neurodiversity is the acceptance movement of it, and recognizing, hey, maybe there is, or maybe there is not a cure. There likely is not. And we shouldn't be forcing or pushing for a cure for something that is just, in reality, just a different way of thinking and perceiving. It's celebrating the neurological differences as valuable traits. So when we think of being neurodivergent, so you've got neurodiversity, which is everybody, and then you've got neurodivergent, which means it's that cognitive difference. It means you fall under this neurodivergent umbrella. This is a great example from the lived experienced educator, who is a neurodiversity advocate in and of themselves. But you can see there's a wide range of different diagnoses that fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. You see ADHD and autism and dyslexia, but you also see Down syndrome, tic disorders like Tourette's, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. It's because our brains have essentially rewired themselves in a different way. And everybody has their own version of the Christmas lights, and their own version of the nuance that comes with the way that their brain is wired. And so there's an what's the best way to describe this? There is a unique approach to each and every person's brain, and it means that they're different than the neurotypical person. Okay, neurotypical. One more phrase to define. Neurotypical means that somebody essentially meets society's definition of quote unquote normal brain activities and patterns. Who is really normal anyway? Well, great question. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's something to consider that because we're designing most of our systems and workplaces and our environments around us, we're designing them for the neurotypical processing in mind, which makes it really, really difficult for neurodivergent individuals to process and to move through the world around them. Ultimately, neurotypical just represents the statistical majority, the most common neurological development pattern in population statistics. If you ever want to feel like really, really intelligent, repeat that phrase. I always feel super smart when I get to quote that particular little bit. But there are some misconceptions that come along with being neurodivergent. Without proper understanding, we may see behaviors that are rooted in neurodivergence that might be misinterpreted. So maybe it's avoiding eye contact. It could be mistaken for disengagement, right? If I wasn't looking at the camera, if I was looking off, and maybe even my tone was different, but I just couldn't really bring myself to make eye contact, you may assume that I'm not really engaged in the conversation, when in reality, for many neurodivergent individuals, it's actually a self-regulation strategy. It allows them to focus on the conversation and what they're talking about without the stress and pressure of making eye contact and essentially performing on the spot. Maybe you've heard of the term info dump. Information dumping is also a tactic where neurodivergent individuals will share a lot of detailed information. Oh my gosh, they can't stop talking about. For example, I work with an autistic individual who is incredibly passionate about the Reds, and he just tells me all about the stats and what's going on with the team, and he's just like, there's a ton of information coming at me. Rather than interpreting that as arrogance, I'm able to recognize that as its passion for what he's talking about. And this is his way of actually trying to connect. You might also see some difficulty in social situations, which might reflect anxiety or social overload, sensory overload, I should say, rather than a lack of interest. This is a great point to kind of take a pause and maybe reflect on as I'm moving my screens around, what are some behaviors that we might consider maybe socially awkward or not totally in line with social norms that we might be able to interpret differently? So whether that's eye contact or information dumping or anxiety or sensory overload, what's a behavior that you might be taken aback by?
You know, when I was working, I interacted with clients, and I learned early on that I had to go in with like three things, and I had to be cognizant of their ability to, listen to me and what their bandwidth was. And I had to remember to adjust what I was presenting and how I was presenting it, because you would get the distant stare, you could tell they weren't into it, and you were losing. So it really forced me to understand how I was coming at it. And to a lot of times, if I had three things in my folder, I may only go through one thing because that's all they had the capacity for at that given meeting. And some things that I thought I could do in like one interaction took three or four, just because that was how they had to handle it. And, once I learned that, the meetings went a lot better.
That is a great example of recognizing somebody's neurodiversity, of recognizing somebody's processing capability, maybe even their processing speed. And it's not that they weren't necessarily engaged or didn't want to hear what you had to say, but right, you learned that you had to present the information in a particular way to keep them with you. I think that's wonderful. Let's see. I saw some comments in here. Lee mentioned stimming or fidgeting. Can I give you just like an air high five? Like, way to go. Absolutely. Yes. Stimming or fidgeting is a term that stands for self-stimulation. So when you think of somebody who's maybe constantly pulling on their ear, maybe biting their nails, but you also might see somebody, for example, I have a lot of neurodivergent tools on my desk. You might see somebody playing with little malleable tools, like some of these magnetic beads. Maybe they might be flapping their hands. There's a wide variety of what stimming can look like and feel like, but it's not necessarily somebody's attempt to distract or gain attention, but in reality, it is their way of calming and de-stimulating their nervous system. So thank you, Lee. Absolutely. Allison shared extreme honesty. Yes, I know that in today's world, there is a certain social nicety that we have to navigate, right? If I won't use a family member because I think I would make fun of my family a little bit more. But if one of my friends showed up wearing a dress or a shirt that I just did not like, maybe the pattern was too bright, maybe it didn't fit, something along those lines, I wouldn't necessarily say, whoa, what's going on there? But somebody whose system doesn't necessarily recognize the social niceties that we have to navigate. Maybe those unspoken rules don't always register. they may be extremely honest and may comment on what the person's wearing or what's going on in the situation around them. It's not necessarily them trying to be rude, but in reality, that's just the way that their system and their communication style works. Rodney made a good point. Sometimes even a defensive outburst, right? If we don't have emotional regulation, which is often a challenge with neurodivergence, we may not have the ability to calmly communicate or calmly navigate an uncomfortable situation. So very, very true. Any others? Jeff says emotional regulation is a challenge with everyone. Amen to that. Some of us have honed that skill more than others, but absolutely emotional regulation can be a challenge. Jeff, I love your comment that you had a manager who started including. Did I explain that in a way that makes sense in her emails to you? That is a great way of making sure that you're recognizing somebody's neurodivergence and being able to navigate somebody else's processing capabilities and speed and preferences. So, guys, I could continue this conversation all day. I'm really enjoying this, but I'm going to keep on moving. So thank you. Those are some misconceptions or ways of communication that might look a little different or feel a little different, but in reality, it might just be rooted in neurodivergence. So more misconceptions. You might see somebody being too sensitive. Oh my gosh, they're always complaining about the lights. Oh, the sound is too loud. Maybe like we were talking about earlier, they're considered blunt or rude. I know we've got some close family friends who has a son on the autism spectrum, and he is often very blunt with us, very honest with us. Maybe you're considered lazy or unmotivated. I know that was one of my challenges before I got my diagnosis, is I felt like I was lazy or unmotivated. I knew I had things I wanted to do, but for some reason couldn't motivate myself to do them. Or maybe somebody's just considered awkward or uncomfortable. But these misconceptions actually represent challenges that individuals with neurodivergence are facing. So instead of being too sensitive, somebody actually might be experiencing sensory challenges. So bright lights and loud noises can be overwhelming. That means open offices, crowded spaces, with a lot of noise and a lot of activity can present really unique challenges. Bluntly, if I may say, that does mean that open offices, like the open concept of cubicles and a lot of noise, can be a living hell for some people. Excuse my French, but it can be very, very difficult. Being blunt or rude is actually a communication difference. Because there are different processing styles, this means that they can lead to misunderstandings. And that direct communication style, right? Because we don't necessarily recognize social unspoken rules or niceties, may seem blunt, when in reality, somebody's just a direct communicator. And that lazy or unmotivated person actually may be struggling with executive functioning or the way that we get things done. So things like organization and time management may require really, really different approaches, and traditional systems often fail. Has anybody heard of time blindness? Can you raise your hand if you've heard of time blindness? Okay, a couple of folks. So, hey, person behind Jeff, absolutely. I'm very excited that you jumped in. Time blindness.
Coffee
so
Connect bomb.
Say again?
She's Coffee Connect bombing.
Okay. So time blindness is somebody's struggle to be able to recognize maybe how long something is going to take, the ability to be on time, things along those kinds of lines. For example, I'm working with one college student who really struggles with his time management. And it's not because he doesn't want to be on time or doesn't recognize that time is passing, but it is difficult to visualize and experience time when you're neurodivergent. So we have to try a lot of really creative approaches to navigating time and seeing our time. Literally, I teach a curriculum called Seeing My Time. It's very, very cool.
I'm convinced our Airbnb host in Athens was neurodivergent now, because he said it was a 5-minute walk from the train station to the Airbnb, and 25 minutes in. while we're still having our luggage on us, right?
Oh,
We weren't there, but yeah.
that also, it might also be the European understanding of time, right? Oh gosh. Well, it sounds like you got your steps in. Finally, somebody who is considered awkward or uncomfortable may just have challenges with social expectations. We naturally have, oh, Jeff's daughter says Llama Life is a great app for time blindness. Thank you very much, Jeff's daughter. I appreciate it. I'm going to take that note, actually. I have a meeting with that later today. Let's go back to social expectations. Thank you, Miranda. Unwritten social rules. We have a lot of them in our society, and you pick up on them over time, reading people's body language and facial expressions and tone. But if you are somebody who doesn't naturally pick up on tone, body language, and facial expressions, then of course it would be difficult for you to understand social expectations. This means things like small talk and networking can feel particularly draining. So, for example, if you're an introvert and you feel drained after networking, take that and turn that up a couple notches. And that might be the exhaustion that somebody experiences after networking because they're pouring so much energy into trying to understand a world around them that they have not gotten the rules to. It can be really, really challenging. So there's an actionable tip, and I think Jeff kind of, with his manager earlier being able to say, how have I explained this in a way that makes sense to you? She's kind of taken these challenges and misconceptions by the hand and been able to flip that. Another way of doing this is managers can shift from saying, what's wrong with this behavior, by asking what needs are behind this behavior. This is something that I have seen actually change in my own family. So, right, I'm the eldest child. I was diagnosed at 27. It was a whirlwind. And it became a conversation between my parents and I, as well as my sister, to be able to say, when I am disconnected from a conversation, it's not me being rude. It means that I need more dopamine. It means that I'm struggling with emotional regulation. It means that I have needs that are not being met. Managers can do the same thing. And instead of assuming malicious intent, like, oh, this employee just isn't getting it, or this person is just trying to be rude, maybe they have a different communication style. Maybe they have a different processing style. And maybe there are needs that just aren't being met. I am not going to let this call go by without mentioning some of the strengths that neurodivergent people bring. And I only have one slide because I could go on all day about the strengths of neurodivergency. But you see strong memory and pattern recognition with a lot of neurodivergent individuals. Maybe not immediate working memory, short-term memory, but that long-term memory can be really beneficial, or can be really well honed. And they also have, us, have strong pattern recognition. And this is speaking in generalities, right? Not each and every neurodivergent person is going to be really great with pattern recognition, right? We're not all Rain Man. But there is the common pattern that many of us are strong with pattern recognition. That pattern recognition and strong memory can build upon each other, and we are able to see that there is the ability to have fantastic big picture thinking and problem solving. And think of it this way. If you're somebody who is constantly reading the world around you, trying to understand what's going on, trying to read social cues, trying to make sure that you're staying on top of what's going on around you so you fit in, you're going to be able to notice more, see more of the picture. And as a result, you're able to problem solve at a greater rate. You're able to problem solve better because you're able to see more of the picture. You're able to take it all in at a greater rate. Again, we spend our lives honing our observational skills and our intuition because we're trying to fit in. We're trying to mask or hide our neurodivergent traits. And so we're spending a lot of time watching others, trying to mimic and trying to follow what we're seeing, but maybe we don't understand why we're doing it. Nonetheless, our observational skills and intuition are really well honed. And then these are some of my favorite traits that come with at least my neurodivergence: narrative reasoning and spontaneity. And all of these strengths kind of build on each other. We've got strong memory and pattern recognition, which leads to big picture thinking and problem solving, honed through observational skills, which leads to narrative reasoning. Narrative reasoning is somebody's ability to take, maybe picture a complicated pile of threads, or like Jeff said earlier, a bundle of Christmas lights that just seems to be tied together. And it's the ability to detangle and pull out threads and line something up, maybe take that complicated pile of threads and weave a tapestry, and be able to describe a complicated situation in a storytelling mode. And then you may not think that spontaneity is a strength. You might think of somebody who's flighty or flaky or something along those lines. But think of the individuals who excel in high pressure environments. Think of first responders. Think of individuals who are in the ER or just really, really high pressure environments. That ability to turn on a dime and quickly jump into the next project, that spontaneity is a fantastic strength. And I could talk all day about why spontaneity is one of the strengths and how it comes together, but you could just simply boil it down to spontaneity equals more dopamine. Dopamine is the happy chemical that keeps our brains running. The more dopamine that we find, the more that we pursue that particular thread. Okay. So what are the...
Can I add to that?
Oh, Jessica, jump in, please, my friend.
So I read this great article on LinkedIn by this owner of a construction company, and he said that 75% of those in construction and manufacturing are neurodivergent, because it is such a task-oriented job and they know what's expected and they can focus really well on what they're doing and do it well. And he said that he always leans into the strengths of the neurodivergent in his company, because when they have a problem that they're trying to solve, he gave an example of one that he had all kinds of people look at it for 3 weeks, and he brought in a neurodivergent employee who solved it in like an hour.
Neurodivergence for the win.
Yep.
There we go. And that is, so Jessica, I'll pay you later. Thank you for helping with the transition. I appreciate that. That is one of the many benefits of embracing neurodiversity, is the fact that you get really unique perspectives and people who can see problems differently. And so you see a lot of creativity, you see problems that are solved quicker, you see processes that are evolved. And in fact, actually, I've got some examples that I'll talk about, but Jessica, just send me an invoice. I don't quite remember what I said I would pay you.
I think it's wine is what you pay me in, is wine.
Oh, I can help with that. I can pay you in wine. Absolutely. Well, so what are the benefits of embracing neurodiversity? Why are we spending this time working with individuals who maybe we don't understand right away, who maybe present a challenge for us? Why should we spend the time? Well, from the employer's perspective, and I do structure this in the employer-employee perspective because I work mostly with organizations and individuals, but the benefits to the employer are, like Jessica said, improved innovation. You see novel solutions to complex problems. You see unique ideas and perspectives and questions asked that were never asked before. You see ultimately an enhanced performance, right? Problems are getting solved quicker. Processes are becoming more efficient. Those unique perspectives really do drive results. And there's an inclusive culture. Today, organizations attract employees because of the cultures that they promote. Of course, employees are looking for pay and benefits and environment, but if I, a neurodivergent individual, was looking for a new job, I would be looking for a culture that welcomes and celebrates me. And so those are the kinds of organizations that bring in the most people. And ultimately, it's a competitive advantage. Diversity as a business strategy is a winning strategy. And you're tapping into talent. There's a vast pool of overlooked talent. In fact, autistic individuals are 80 to 85% under or unemployed. When in reality, if with a little bit of accommodation and grace, we could tap into that pool of talent and really leverage, I think, some phenomenal individuals and brilliance and wonderful traits. And at the same time, there are benefits to that individual as well. You get a sense of belonging. There's increased job satisfaction and well-being when individuals feel like they belong in an organization. You see an increase in confidence and self-esteem because you've allowed somebody to feel valued and respected in the process. It also reduces stigma and discrimination because we're trying to create a more equitable workplace in the process. And it gives somebody an opportunity to thrive. All of these are tied to somebody's basic dignity and their basic rights to thrive and celebrate themselves in their own lives. And we know that work is such a large part of our lives. So why not create an environment that allows us to feel like our full selves? So there are a couple examples, and I'm going to go through these quickly because I still want to have time for conversation, and I've got some some strategies that we can implement. So SAP is one of the organizations that has kind of led the neurodiversity movement, especially here in the States. In 2012, they integrated an autism at work program, which gained applicants with high levels, master degrees, dual degrees. Some even brought patents onto the team. And of course, their internal results were fantastic. They saw increased productivity, quality, innovation, the employee engagement went way up. But I loved the manager results because managers got to know each other, each employee, I should say, on a different and deeper level, resulting in more of a customized management process. And one of the managers was even quoted as saying it made them a better manager without a doubt. And HP Enterprises is another leader. They placed more than 30 participants in software testing roles in Australia's Department of Human Services. And as a result, teams were 30% more productive. But one of the coolest results was the fact that team members were actually able to recognize behavioral patterns on the client's process or on the client side that was creating crises and delays before program launches, which actually led to a redesign of the entire process, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'll turn it to you for a moment. What are some ways that you think somebody's neurodivergence, maybe the different way that they see a problem or their different communication style, might benefit you either at work or personally?
Attention to detail and creativity.
Yeah, how so?
Well, I would say there are a lot of very smart people out there, smart driven people who just aren't creative by their own admission. And I just think we neurodivergent folks, it's hard to explain. We tend to just think of things that otherwise would not exist. So
Yeah,
hard to explain, but the creativity knack.
creativity knack, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else?
Coach Lee.
Yeah, I have my hand raised. Yes.
Oh,
So
good.
I identify as autistic, and I would say that one of the best ways that we could be more productive is to really say things directly. I mean,
Mm,
clearing up exactly what needs to be done instead of leaving this room for nuance and figuring it out. I've had that happen too many times where it was implied that something should be done, but not exactly how and exactly when it needed to be done or what it looked like. It was just up to me to figure that out. And when I would do my best to figure it out and present it back to the company or the manager, it wouldn't be to their specifications. That would save so much company time and my morale to just figure out what you need first and then
absolutely.
explain it.
Absolutely. That level of direct communication and clarity can save so much time and frustration. And I find that even today, like I will watch my emotional regulation kind of fluctuate if somebody can't be direct with me, right? It would save a lot of frustration if we could. I think that's awesome. Anybody else?
Just to add to that, I always appreciate a direct nature, but I also want them to be respectful, because if they're not respectful, if they're direct but aggressive and hostile, that'll probably cause me to shut down. So I know that's asking a lot perhaps, but direct yet respectful.
If I could just chime in, Jeff, I'm with you 100%. There's no reason to be hostile about it. It's just here's what we need to get done and here's how you do it. You can remove all the emotion from it. You just know that you're on the same page with what needs to be done and how it needs to be done.
Mhm.
I'm with you.
I think there's something really interesting that I have experienced, whereas like if we were more formulaic with our expectations and very clear with what we were trying to explain to somebody, like even in communication, this is how you are direct but friendly. Hi there, hope you're doing well. Here are my expectations. End with a question. If we could teach and communicate in a more formulaic way, it would, in some ways, help individuals whose brains work that way, make expectations clear for everybody, and at the same time get our point across while maintaining that professionalism and positivity. Yeah, I think that's.
So as I'm listening to all this, right, I'm thinking back 25 years in the Navy, and we've never had any training on this from a military standpoint, right? But yet, surely there are neurodivergent, right, individuals serving in our military, and I mean, maybe it's processed within our leadership training that we take and things like that, but it definitely doesn't get specified. So it's interesting to hear all the different takes because, people are direct and sometimes they are harsh, Jeff, right? In the military, because it is a hierarchy of leadership, and that understanding goes a long way. So having that kind of understanding between all of us, how does that play into just normal corporate culture? Because although there is a hierarchy within corporate culture, right, it's not as strict because, well, if I tell my captain off, right, well, that might not be a good thing. But if you tell your boss off, right, I mean, you're not going to prison or jail for it.
I hope not. I don't know. That is a great question, and one that can you help me with it again? So I apologize. My brain is very formulaic, so I missed the complete ask there.
We don't go through this direct process of training leaders on how to communicate with neurodivergency or anything like that, right? I mean, we accept leaders for who they are and what they do and how they communicate or whatever else. And some are better than other. We all recognize that, right? So, I mean, my question is, if you've got this neurodivergent person and we're trying to teach leaders to be better leaders by communicating more effectively and stuff with them, right? How is that? I guess the real question is more for you, Samantha, is that, have you approached the military? Have you talked to them and said, hey, there's room for this in your organizations because we have people that obviously are diagnosed or they identify, as being neurodivergent, and how can we help them?
I have not approached anybody in the military yet. Partially because I am a delicate little flower and I don't know that I could handle the direct form of communication. I'm kidding. I think that's a really good question. I would almost defer to somebody. Lee, do you actually feel comfortable contributing to this question considering your experience?
So the question is, I do. The question is around how to teach leadership to interact with neurodivergent people.
Military leadership in
Military
this case?
leadership, is that okay? I guess it depends on the flavor of neurodivergence. Because
Yeah.
if you're ADHD and you can't pay attention to these boring orders that are coming at you, the structure of the military is to give you lots of exercise so that you will pay attention, or work off your energy so that you will pay attention, right? So it's the understanding of that piece, and it benefits the military to give you that exercise so that you are essentially a stronger soldier. So it'd be a really kind of difficult sell in the understanding of it. So that's all I have. I don't know what to say here.
It's a difficult question. Honestly,
yeah, it is
it
a pretty
is.
difficult question.
And maybe it's 15 years or 10 years being removed, 15 away from really combative type stuff, right? But it sounds to me, Lee, and I do agree that there are systems already in place and processes put in place, right, to help balance it, right? Balance the communication efforts of it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because it's a whole structure and it's a little difficult, but I know we want to include and be more inclusive. So there could be ways to we go through all kinds of training in the military. So there could be ways to educate, to help people understand. If you have a star soldier who we've actually had something like this in my platoon, who was really demand avoidant, which means he just wasn't interested in following orders, but what a place to be for that. But he was excellent. He did all the exercises. He ranked highest in shooting, but it was just being able to get him to actually focus and buy in. And so there is a missed opportunity if leaders aren't able to recognize what's going on with them and being able to do that. So I think that more communication and understanding. But it's a really difficult question because there's already a structure in place. Not impossible, just something that needs a lot of, I think, education around so
Yeah.
that leaders will actually buy in.
Yeah. Lee, I think you said that beautifully. Lamar, I see that your hand is raised. I want to give a moment for you to.
First of all, this has been excellent information. You mentioned that you were diagnosed at age 27. I've had a family member who was diagnosed in her 40s. So what are the school systems doing to help diagnose kids earlier? Because my granddaughter was diagnosed in the second grade, and it's made a heck of a difference the way they've now educated her. And she's now right at the top of her class. But what are schools doing to identify this issue?
That is a wonderful question. And while schools aren't necessarily my area of expertise, I work mostly in the professional space. I think we are learning more and more about how ADHD and autism represent and present for individuals. You're seeing a lot more, you're seeing a significant increase in adult diagnoses because we're learning more about how it represents in children. And then parents are taking their children to get diagnosed and they're going, hold on, I have that trait and I have that trait and I have that trait. So it's really been educating teachers earlier and earlier. And I mean, women weren't included in neurodivergent studies until like the early 2000s. So for the longest time, ADHD itself was just represented by how it showed up in young boys. And even then, I'm pretty sure it was young white boys. There wasn't like a lot of diversity in the study itself. So it's opening up and beginning to really understand the wide variety of neurodiversity and how it does show up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Samantha's only 30, so she was only diagnosed 3 years ago, right? So
Whoa, you never quote a young woman's age, sir.
So
I am only 30.
But I say that because my son is 19. He was diagnosed when he was maybe 6 or 7, and I when he graduated this past year, right? We accredited a lot of his success to a lot of his teachers, Lamar, and his IEP programs that he's been on forever now, right? And will be on the IEP as well when he goes to university, goes to college, right? In August and stuff. So I think our school systems have gotten better. Maybe not so much at recognizing who is and who isn't, but definitely once they are diagnosed, as far as putting the programs together for them so they can mesh with their peers as much as possible and learn coping mechanisms, right, to be able to continue on in their schools and stuff like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to keep on moving forward just because I've got a couple more slides I want to make sure to hit. There are some inclusion strategies and tactics that we can put into place, and then I'll stick around for questions afterwards, by the way. There are some communications best practices that we can put into place in work, out of work, wherever we are. Like we've been talking about, clear and direct language is really important. So avoiding vague instructions, providing step-by-step guidance or written follow-ups can be really beneficial and really helpful when trying to help somebody navigate an unfamiliar process. Visual aids and demonstrations. Many neurodivergent individuals are visual learners, so using diagrams, charts, and checklists can help them process the information a little bit more effectively. And providing flexible feedback methods. So whether that's written, whether that's verbal. Some people, because of their processing speed and structure, they work better when they're able to write out an answer or write out a response rather than giving something verbal on the spot. So just asking somebody how they prefer to communicate or checking those preferences when you have conversations can be helpful. It's important to avoid idioms or sarcasm. The more authentic your tone can be, the better somebody can understand you. So instead of saying, oh, this is just a wild goose chase, trying to be very, very clear and say, this doesn't make sense. It's not worth our time. It just allows somebody to take another level off of their processing structure and be able to say, okay, I don't have to worry about interpreting what they say. I can just read them at a surface level and then slow down. I know I'm talking very fast, so I'm not a great representative of this example today, but many neurodivergent individuals struggle with something called auditory processing disorder, where they hear something and it just takes an extra second or two to hear or to respond and to process. So just slowing down and allowing somebody a little bit of time to process what you're saying is helpful. We can adapt workflows and workplaces with flexible scheduling. So allowing flexible hours so somebody maybe doesn't get overwhelmed with public transportation or traffic, can work in quieter hours, maybe just work with their own energy flows. Using task prioritization tools to allow them to focus in on what really needs to happen rather than being overwhelmed by analysis paralysis and the wide variety of things they need to do. And quiet workspaces. I cannot emphasize this enough. Again, I mentioned earlier, open office spaces can be really difficult, but allowing for quiet zones in your space, noise canceling headphones if that's not a possibility, just the ability for somebody to eliminate a level of stimulus or stimulation can help somebody really focus in, maintain emotional regulation, and remain productive. There are supportive tools and policies that we can put into place, like job carving, customizing our roles to focus on the individual's strengths and talents rather than their limitations or what they can and cannot do. We can do mentorship programs, particularly pairing other neurodivergent individuals with leaders who are neurodivergent or who have experience with neurodivergence. I will forever be an advocate of a clear accommodations process. Accommodations are scary and uncomfortable. They often imply legal support. They often imply having to contact HR. But if we can remove unnecessary barriers and make it a very clear and straightforward process to request accommodations, the more people will embrace it, the more productive, and the more happier they will be. Did somebody have a question? Okay, never mind. And then ultimately, we need to train our managers, make sure that people are equipped with the skills to identify and empower neurodivergent team members. And we can do this in a couple of ways. We can help people describe their team members' needs to others. One of our family friends whose son is on the spectrum had a phenomenal manager for a while. That manager left the organization, and the manager that took over for him wasn't equipped to describe his needs to the other team members. And as a result, when complaints would come in based on his communication style or the way that he navigated work, that manager wasn't able to defend, support, re-navigate or reposition somebody's frustration and help them understand why maybe this person communicated that way. And as a result, our family friend's son was let go of his job because of his diagnosis. Don't worry, there was legal action taken, but you don't want to be in the position of having to take legal action or having legal action taken against you. Ultimately, giving managers the language to intervene without disclosing somebody's disability empowers them to be able to support, defend, and reposition somebody in the workplace without having to essentially out them for something that they may not be comfortable discussing in the first place. Pairing them with individuals who can share more about the lived experience, encouraging multiple modes of communication, and just educating. We can create psychological safety by encouraging self-advocacy, embracing alternative working styles, and ultimately normalizing flexibility. allowing somebody to work at a pace that works for them, allowing them to work in a way that works for them, and allowing them to openly raise their hand and say what they need all creates psychological safety in a workplace. I apologize, I am flying through this because I want to respect everybody's time. While we can't ask if somebody is neurodivergent or not, we can ask questions like these to help understand how they work and what they need. Questions like, how can I help you maintain focus during the workday? What can I do to help you feel more comfortable at work? Are there routines you prefer to stick to during a workday? You can ask these questions of anybody, neurodivergent or neurotypical, to better understand how they work and what they need. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if we use universal design, where we use an inclusive foundation, designing for diversity from the start, build accommodations into the support systems that we have, and making sure that we utilize flexibility, at the end, everybody benefits. I know I flew through that last part, but I'm here for questions. I'm here for discussion. I would love to chat with anybody if there's anything that we can share.